Tonight we sit with one of Zen's most enduring teachings, beginner's mind. It is the freedom of meeting your life as if for the first time. We carry so much that we believe we already know about ourselves, about others, and about how life is supposed to be. That certainty can become a weight. It narrows what we see, exhausts the mind, and keeps us from seeing life as it is. When we learn to approach life with a beginner's mind, the worries we hold so tightly begin to loosen, and we rediscover what has been here all along: peace and the quiet freedom of not needing to know everything. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. The Zen teacher Shunryu Suzuki said that in the beginner's mind there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind there are few. Tonight, with Zen tales and teachings, we will explore putting a little of that weight down. There is nothing here you need to achieve. You do not have to follow every word. Let your shoulders relax. Let the day you have had begin to fall behind you. Thank you for joining us here at Midnight Monk. Let us begin. In Zen, there is a word for the kind of mind we will rest in tonight. The word is Shoshin. It means beginner's mind. The Buddha taught that everything we know begins in the mind. The opening lines of the Dhammapada say that mind comes before all things, that mind is their master, that all things are made by the mind. How we see shapes the world we live in. So if we wish for a little more peace, it makes sense to begin where everything begins. We begin with how we see. Think of the last time you learned something truly new. A craft you had never tried. A language whose words felt strange in your mouth. A city you walked for the first time, with no idea which street led where. In those first hours, everything was vivid. You noticed small things. You asked simple questions. You did not pretend to understand. Your mind was wide open, and the world poured in. That open mind is beginner's mind. And here is the strange part. We seem to have it most at the very start. As we learn, we slowly close. We gather knowledge, and without meaning to, we let that knowledge harden into a wall. Soon we are sure we know how things are. And our certainty, so quietly that we never feel it happen, begins to blind us. You have surely met a person like this. Someone so certain they are right that they can no longer hear anyone else. You begin to explain something new, and before you have finished, they wave a hand and say, "No, that cannot be done. I know how this works." They are not foolish. Often they are deeply skilled. That is the very trouble. Their skill has made them sure, and their sureness has shut their eyes. And if we are honest with ourselves, we may all have been that person at one time or another. We might have clutched an idea of how things are and missed what was actually in front of us. We might have spoken to someone as though they were the same as yesterday, when something in them had changed. We meant no harm. We simply stopped looking. Tonight we turn toward the other way of living. The fresh way. The way of meeting this moment, and then the next, as though for the first time. Life keeps changing, after all. The morning that is coming has never existed before. Only a fresh mind can meet a fresh world. A mind that clings to how things were will always be a little surprised and a little let down. A mind that stays open can rest in what is here. Let us picture a calligrapher who lived long ago in a town at the foot of a great mountain. For 40 years he had worked with brush and ink. His name was known far beyond his valley. Nobles sent messengers to ask for his writing, and they hung his work in their halls. Of all the characters he painted, one had made him famous. It was the character for morning. People said that when he painted it, you could almost feel the first soft light of dawn rising off the paper. He had painted it 10,000 times. His hand knew it so well that he no longer had to think. He was certain there was one correct way to make it, and just as certain that he had found that way long ago. One spring, a young woman came to study at his school. She had grown up in a mountain village and had never held a brush in her life. On her first morning, the master laid out paper and ink before his students and painted the character for morning on a wide sheet for all to see. "There is one way to make this first stroke," he said. "It falls from the top, firm where it begins, soft where it ends. Watch closely and copy it just so." The students bowed their heads and began. The young woman watched for a while. Then she dipped her brush and made the stroke in her own way. Her line began soft and grew strong toward the end, the very opposite of his. The master moved between the tables, nodding at one student, correcting another. When he reached her place, he looked down at her paper and his brow tightened. "That is not how it is done," he said. "The stroke falls. It does not rise." "I am sorry, master," she said. "I did not know the rule. But when I think of morning, the light does not fade. It grows. The day gets brighter, not darker. So my line grew stronger too, the way the morning does." He opened his mouth to correct her a second time, and then he stopped. He looked again at her clumsy, uneven stroke. The ink had pooled a little at the end, where she had pressed too hard. Then he turned and looked at his own character, drying on the wall, the one he had made 10,000 times. And for the first time in many long years, he truly looked at it. His stroke was perfect. Every part of it was exactly right, and it was lifeless. His hand had repeated it so often that nothing living remained in it. He had stopped seeing it years ago and had never once noticed that he had stopped. Her stroke was awkward. A child could have pointed out its faults, and it was alive. A real morning breathed inside it, because she had thought of a real morning while she made it. The master stood very still. The students grew nervous, certain he was about to scold her. "How long have I painted this character?" he asked quietly. 40 years, master," said one of the older students. 40 years, he repeated. "And this young woman, who has held a brush for the space of a single morning, has shown me something I lost long ago. For years, I have not been painting this character at all. I have only been copying myself." Then he did something the students had never seen. He bowed to her, a master bowing to a beginner on her first day. A few of them gasped. "Thank you," he said. "You have given me back my eyes." From that morning, the calligrapher worked in a new way. Before he painted anything, he would sit for a while with the blank, empty paper and let go of every character he had ever made. He tried to come to the page as though he had never seen a brush before. Some days his hand trembled a little, the way a true beginner's hand does. He did not mind at all. He told his students that his work had been finished and still for years without his knowing it, and now, in his old age, it had finally come back to life. Some weeks later, a wealthy merchant who had bought one of his morning characters years before came to the school to ask for another. He was a careful man who liked things to match. When the new work was placed in his hands, he frowned. "This is not the same as the one I own," he said. "The stroke is different. It rises." "It is different," the master agreed. "The one you own was made by a man who thought he already knew what morning was. This one was made by a man who looked at the morning again." The merchant studied the paper for a long while. He was not a man given to soft feeling, yet something in the living stroke reached him. "The old one is calm," he said at last. "But this one I would like to wake up to." He paid for it gladly and carried it home, and he hung it where the first light of day would fall across it each morning. The calligrapher did not become a lesser artist when he set down what he knew. He became a truer one. His skill had not vanished. His 40 years were not wasted. What changed was that he stopped letting his knowledge do his seeing for him. He let his own eyes look again. Beginner's mind does not ask you to throw away what you have learned. It asks you to hold it more loosely, so that it serves you instead of standing between you and the world. When we are new to something, we pay close attention. A small child shows us this plainly. Watch a little boy meet a smooth river stone for the first time. He turns it over in his hands. He feels its weight. He holds it up to the light, taps it against the floor, runs it along his cheek. He has no idea what a stone is supposed to be, and so he meets the stone that is actually there. We lose this slowly as we grow. We learn the names of things, and once we know the name, we stop looking. We see a stone, and we move on. We do this with nearly everything. We do it with our own streets and our own meals. We do it with our work. And, most of all, we do it with the people closest to us. We decide who they are. Then we stop meeting them and meet our idea of them instead. This is the expert's mind, and it does not live only in masters and scholars. It lives in all of us. It is the part that says, "I already know this." And in the moment we believe we already know, something closes. We stop being able to learn. We stop being able to see. It is worth asking why we close at all. Part of it is simple comfort. Knowing feels safe. If I am sure how the world works, I feel steady in it. I can predict and plan and feel in control. There is nothing wrong with that. We need some of it to live. The difficulty comes when the need to feel sure grows stronger than the wish to see clearly. Then we begin to defend our ideas instead of looking at what is real. We would rather be right than be awake. And slowly, without ever choosing it, we trade the living world for our picture of it. Shunryu Suzuki, the Zen teacher who carried this teaching to the West, said it simply. In the beginner's mind there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind there are few. The expert has narrowed the whole world down to what he expects of it. The beginner is still open to what is truly there. There is a real freedom in this, and a real rest. Carrying the weight of always knowing is tiring. It is hard work to keep the world sorted and explained and under control. When you set some of that down, the world grows interesting again. A familiar face becomes worth looking at. An ordinary morning becomes worth waking for. You stop living inside your thoughts about life and begin, here and there, to actually live it. The Buddha pointed, again and again, to seeing things as they actually are, rather than as we assume them to be. Our assumptions are fast, and they are silent. They arrive before we notice them, whispering that we have already seen, when in truth we have not yet looked. Nowhere does this matter more than with the people we love. We gather a lifetime of ideas about them. We know how they will answer before they speak. And in knowing them so well, we slowly stop seeing them. A person standing right beside us can become almost invisible, hidden behind our long history of knowing who they are. To meet someone you love with a beginner's mind is a kindness. You let them be new. You let them have changed. You give them the freedom to be more than your memory of them. And often, when you look at them this way, something warm returns that you thought had faded. It had not faded. You had only stopped looking. You can taste this for yourself in the smallest way. Tomorrow, choose one ordinary thing. The face of someone you live with. The cup you hold each morning. The view from a window you pass without a glance. For just a few breaths, meet it as if you had never seen it before. Let the name fall away. Let the story fall away. Let go of the thought that you already know it. And simply look. At first it may feel like nothing. Then, often, something opens. You notice a detail you had long stopped seeing. The light resting on a cheek. A small worn chip on the rim of the cup. The way a familiar tree has changed while you were not watching. The thing was there all along. You had only stopped meeting it. That is the whole of it. You are not adding anything. You are thinning the layer of knowing that has settled between you and your own life. When that layer grows thin, even for a moment, the world feels close again. And that closeness is its own kind of peace. It is the ease of a person who is fully here, meeting what is truly in front of them, asking, in a soft and wordless way, "What is this?" Let us stop here for a moment. There is nothing in these words you need to carry with you. Just notice how you are feeling now, and let that be enough. We will go on whenever you feel ready. Picture a traveler who walks the same road each morning to the same well, fills the same jar, and returns along the same path. For years his mornings unfold like this, until the day comes when he lowers his jar and finds the well has run dry. He stands there holding the empty jar, and something in him protests. This is not how it is meant to be. The well has always given water. Surely it should give water still. We all carry this hidden expectation. We expect the well to stay full, the road to stay clear, the people we love to remain as they have always been, our own bodies and minds to stay familiar to us. We rarely notice the expectation at all until life breaks it without warning. The cart does not arrive when we counted on it. A friend changes in a manner we never predicted. A season we imagined would last forever comes to its end. And each time, somewhere underneath, a small voice murmurs, "But it was not supposed to be this way." The Buddha returned to this truth again and again, and called it one of the deepest facts of our existence. Everything made of parts will one day come apart. Whatever arises also passes. Nothing that is made stays exactly as it is, not for a single hour. This is not a punishment, and it is not some sad accident. It is simply how things are. The trees understand it. The rivers understand it. Only we, with our wishes and our memories, keep hoping it might somehow not be true. There is a tenderness hidden inside this truth as well. The very things we love are precious because they do not last. A warm afternoon beside someone dear would mean far less if there were countless identical afternoons stretching on without end? A small child's hand in yours is precious because by next year that hand will be larger. The cherry trees are loved across the world not only despite how quickly their blossoms fall, but partly because of it. Their brief flowering is what moves people to travel for miles and stand beneath them in silence. If the blossoms lasted forever, we would walk past without lifting our eyes. In Zen, there is a short phrase that holds all of this within it. 3 small words, not always so. Whatever you feel most certain of, whatever seems most solid and fixed, you can set this gentle reminder beside it. Not always so. The hard times, and the good times too. Not always so. Far away, in the forests of Thailand, there once lived a much-loved teacher named Ajahn Chah. Students traveled from all over the world to sit with him beneath the trees. He had a habit that puzzled the newcomers. Whenever someone became very certain of something, very rigid in a view, he would lift his hand and say, simply, "It's uncertain." A student might announce that he had finally understood his own mind. "It's uncertain," the teacher would answer, with a smile. Another might despair that she would never find any peace at all. "It's uncertain," he would say to her, just the same. He was not playing games. He was offering them the most freeing truth he knew. For here is the part we forget while we are busy resisting it. If all things change, then the hard things change as well. The sorrow that feels endless tonight is also moving, also shifting, also not always so. When this truly lands in us, change stops being only a thief that carries off our treasures. It becomes the very thing that makes new life possible. Without change, nothing could ever grow. Without endings, nothing fresh could ever begin. There is a beautiful practice kept by certain monks high in the mountains, and a story is often told about it. A group of these monks would gather to create a great picture made entirely of colored sand. Not with brush or paint, but with countless fine grains, laid down one careful pour at a time. They would bend over a low table for many days, setting down red and blue and gold and white, building an image of astonishing detail and beauty. They worked in near silence, leaning close, breathing carefully so as not to scatter a single grain. The colors were poured through slender tubes and tapped out a little at a time, so that even a wide field of blue was built from thousands of small, deliberate moments. People came from distant villages simply to watch it take shape. Among them, one season, was a young monk new to the work. He poured the sand with his whole heart, and as the picture grew lovelier, day by day, he grew more attached to it. He began to feel it was the finest thing he had ever helped to bring into being. At last, after many days, the picture was complete. It glowed in the light of the hall, perfect, down to the smallest grain. The young monk stepped back, full of pride and tenderness for what they had made. Then the eldest monk came forward. With one calm sweep of his hand, he drew his fingers through the sand, scattering the careful lines into a blur of mingled color. The young monk could not help himself. "Why?" he cried. "We worked for so many days. It was perfect. Why undo it?" The elder smiled at him with great warmth. "We did not make it in order to keep it," he said. "We made it to learn how to love something completely, and then to open our hands and release it. The beauty was never in keeping the picture. The beauty was in the making of it, and now it is in the letting go." The young monk looked at the ruined picture and then back at the elder. "But all that work," he said, "all those days." "The work was not lost," the elder answered. "It lives in you now. The patience you practiced, the care you learned, you will carry into everything your hands ever touch from this day on. That cannot be swept away. Only the sand can." Together, the monks brushed the colored sand into a simple bowl. They carried it down to a flowing stream and poured it in, and the bright grains were taken up by the water and carried out into the wider world. The young monk watched the colors vanish into the current. To his surprise, the grief he had braced for did not come. What he felt instead was something lighter, almost like relief. He had loved the picture fully, and he had let it go fully, and somehow nothing in that felt like loss. It felt close to freedom. We often believe that the surest way to protect what we love is to grip it more tightly. But clinging keeps nothing safe. It only fills the present moment with the fear of losing what is going to change regardless. The monks were practicing something else entirely. Love the thing completely while it is here. Then, when its time arrives, open your hands. It is not change itself that causes our suffering. It is the wish that things would not change. A flower does not suffer as its petals fall. A river does not grieve as it rounds a bend. Our ache is born in the gap between how things are and how we insist they ought to stay. Narrow that gap, even a little, and a great deal of our struggle eases on its own. You can notice this in the smallest frustrations. When the rain spoils a plan, the rain is not really the trouble. The plan in your head, the one that demanded a clear sky, is what aches when it meets a wet afternoon. The rain is only being rain. The moment you let the afternoon be what it is, the struggle loosens, and now and then you find an unexpected pleasure waiting inside the very change you did not want. Consider two travelers who once met on a mountain road. The first was a merchant who had walked this route many times, carrying goods between two far apart towns. He knew every inn, every bridge, every turn in the path, and he liked it so. He took real comfort in knowing exactly what each day would hold. But this season the mountain had its own plans. The spring rains had swollen the river and torn away a bridge he had always crossed. The familiar inn, where he liked to rest, had shut its doors. A slide of earth had buried a stretch of the path, forcing a long way around. With each new trouble, the merchant grew more upset. "This is wrong," he muttered. "The bridge was always here. The inn was always open. The road was always clear. Nothing is as it should be." Walking beside him for a time was a pilgrim, a wandering practitioner who carried little more than a robe and a bowl. She met all the same troubles: the broken bridge, the closed inn, the buried path. Yet she went on with an untroubled heart, finding another place to cross the water, sharing a little food at the roadside, humming to herself as she climbed the long way round. At last the merchant could bear his confusion no longer. "How can you be so at ease?" he asked her. "Everything has gone wrong. Nothing is as it was." The pilgrim smiled. "Friend," she said, "I left home expecting the road to change. A road is a living thing. The river rises and falls. Bridges are built and wash away. Inns open and close their doors. If I demanded that the mountain stay exactly as I remembered it, I would be angry at the mountain every single day of my life. So I ask nothing of it. I meet what is here this morning and then I meet what is here the next. The road has been far kinder to me since I stopped insisting that it hold still. But do you never wish for the old bridge back? He asked, the one that was easier. Sometimes, she said. Wishing is no crime. I only try not to live there. The bridge that is gone cannot carry me across. The river that is here can still teach me where to cross today. The merchant walked on a long while in silence. For years he had fought the changing road, arriving each evening tired and sour. For the first time, he found himself wondering what it might feel like to travel the other way, expecting nothing, meeting each day as it actually arrived. There is great rest in this, once we stop bracing ourselves against it. To live with the truth of not always so is to set down a heavy and impossible task, the task of keeping everything the same. We were never going to manage it. The seasons were always going to turn, with us or without our blessing. And this includes how we see our own selves. The person you are this evening is not quite the one you were 10 years ago, nor quite the one you will be 10 years from now. Your views have shifted. Your heart has softened in certain places and grown sturdier in others. This is no flaw to be corrected. It is simply what it means to be alive. A mind that lets itself change can keep meeting life with fresh eyes, free of the burden of forever defending who it used to be. There is comfort in this on the harder days as well. When something weighs on the heart, it can feel as though it will always weigh just the same. But feelings are made of parts, like all things, and they move. The heaviness you carry tonight is already changing, even now, even if you cannot yet feel it begin to lift. You do not have to force it away. You need only remember, softly, that it will not always be just as it is. Mornings come. Tides turn. The heart, given a little time, finds its way back toward ease. Even this teaching, the masters of Zen would remind us, is not the last word. Not always so applies to itself as well. We hold it lightly, as we are slowly learning to hold all things. We do not harden it into one more fixed belief to grip. We let it stay open and let it keep teaching us. You might simply notice, here and there across your days, the places where you are quietly asking life to stand still. A flash of irritation when plans shift. A tightening when someone surprises you. These are not failings. They are small signals, little taps on the shoulder, inviting you to loosen your hold and meet what is truly in front of you, rather than what you expected to find there. Let us linger here a moment. Feel the breath as it moves, already changing, never quite the same twice. There is nothing to keep hold of. When you are ready, we will carry on. Let us begin with a question that once unsettled a group of students in a forest monastery. For years they had studied under a teacher known across the region for his calm and his clear seeing. He lived simply among the tall trees, far from any town. One season, a few of his students grew restless. They had come to believe that the deepest truth still lay somewhere beyond them, in famous places they had not yet visited, in the words of teachers they had not yet met. And so they decided to set out and find it. Before they left, they came to him together. One of them spoke for the rest. "Teacher, we have studied with you for a long time, and we are grateful. But before we go, will you tell us the most important thing? The single truth we should carry above all others?" The teacher did not answer. He looked at them with kindness, and he said nothing. The silence stretched on past the point of comfort. A breeze moved through the leaves overhead. A bird called once, then fell still. The students leaned in, certain that something rare was about to be spoken, the very thing they had waited years to hear. At last he said, "The most important thing is to find out what the most important thing is." Then he folded his hands and said no more. The students looked at one another. They waited, sure there must be something else to follow. But that was the whole of his answer. One of them felt a flicker of disappointment. He had wanted something solid to carry with him, and instead the teacher had handed him back his own question. It was only years later, after much wandering and many other teachers, that this student finally understood what he had been given that morning. He had crossed rivers and climbed mountains. He had sat with famous masters and copied out long books of their teachings. Then one ordinary evening, resting at the side of a road with sore feet and a calm mind, it came to him. He had been chasing a final answer the whole time, certain it lay just ahead of him. What he saw at last was that the searching itself, when it was honest and warm, had been the very thing he left home to find. He smiled then, remembering the patience in his teacher's face and the long silence beneath the trees. It can sound like a riddle or even a small joke, but the teacher meant it with his whole heart, and he was pointing at something most of us overlook. We tend to treat wisdom as a thing that can be handed over, like a coin passed from one palm to another. We imagine the truth as a final answer waiting at the end of the road. Once we reach it, we tell ourselves the restlessness will stop, the searching will be over, and we will be allowed to rest. And so we hurry. We move from one teaching to the next, always a little impatient to arrive. We have all felt this pull. We buy the book that we are sure will change everything, and leave it half read while we send for the next one. We try one practice for a week, decide it is not quite right, and go off in search of a better method. There is nothing wrong with seeking, but beneath the seeking there often hides a belief that we are not yet allowed to be at peace. That peace is a reward kept somewhere ahead, locked behind the correct answer. And while we wait for that answer to arrive, our actual life is happening now, mostly unwatched. The teacher in the forest was pointing to something else. This searching is not aimless wandering. It is the genuine longing to see what is real, to know this life as it actually is. And the remarkable thing is that this longing can be answered at any moment, because what is real is always right here. To see the present moment with fresh eyes, even for an instant, is itself the treasure. It is not a poor substitute for some greater prize waiting at the end of the road. The present moment, met honestly, is already rich and full and complete. A person who keeps looking, with a sincere and open heart, is not endlessly missing the answer. They are arriving at it again and again, in each thing they truly see. Think of the difference between being told that a place is beautiful and standing within it yourself. Someone can describe a high valley to you in perfect detail, the cool air, the rush of water, the light moving on the far slopes. You might nod and feel you understand. But it is nothing at all like walking the path yourself, breathing hard, and rounding the final bend to see it open before you. A truth that is handed to you rests lightly on the surface. A truth you reach through your own searching sinks in and becomes part of who you are. This is why the teacher would not simply give his students their answer. He did not wish to rob them of the very journey that would make the answer real. There is a trap that waits for us when the mind fixes on a faraway goal. As long as our attention is fastened to some prize in the future, we are never quite here. You sit down hoping to find some stillness, and part of you is already straining toward the calm you mean to reach tomorrow. You try to be present, and you turn even presence into one more thing to accomplish. So the peace keeps slipping past, not because it is far away, but because you keep leaning beyond it. Shunryu Suzuki was once asked by a student whether all of this effort, all this sitting and searching, would truly lead to awakening. He answered that if your practice is sincere, it is almost as good as awakening itself. There is something in honest effort, in showing up with a true and willing heart, that already holds the very peace we imagine is stored only at the finish. Peace was never waiting for us in some far country. It is here, in this very moment, the instant we stop rushing past it and truly look. An old story told in China long ago says much the same thing in another voice. In an ancient kingdom, a king sat in the shade of his courtyard, reading slowly from a stack of worn scrolls. The afternoon was warm and unhurried. Not far away, an old wheelwright was at work, shaping a cartwheel with chisel and mallet, his hands roughened by a lifetime of the craft. The steady tap of his tools was the only sound in the courtyard. After a time, the wheelwright set down his mallet, looked up, and spoke. "Forgive me, my lord. May I ask what it is you are reading so closely?" "The words of the great sages," the king said. "The wisest people who ever lived. And are these sages still among us?" "No," said the king. "They lived long ago and passed from the world many years past." The wheelwright nodded and was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Then perhaps an old craftsman may be forgiven for saying that what you hold there might be only the husk they left behind." At this, the king looked up, more curious than offended. Bold words. What could a maker of wheels understand about the wisdom of sages? "Only what my own work has taught me," the wheelwright answered. "I have shaped wheels all my life. When I carve the hollow at the center of the hub, where the axle must rest, there is a certain feel to it that decides everything. If my hand moves too fast, the cut comes out loose, and the wheel will wobble and soon wear away. If my hand moves too slow, the cut comes out tight, and the wheel will bind and never roll freely. The right touch lives somewhere in between. I know it the moment I feel it. Yet I could not put it into words for you if I tried. I have spent years trying to teach it to my own son, and even so, I cannot simply give it to him. He must find it in his own hands, slowly, through his own long labor. Now, I am only a plain craftsman. If I cannot hand on the small knack of my hands, how much more must this be true of the great sages? Whatever they truly understood, the living heart of it, could not be pressed onto a page. What words could carry, they wrote down. But the deepest part of their knowing was theirs alone, and it could only be found, never simply received. "Then what would you have me do?" the king asked. "Cast my books into the fire." The wheelwright shook his head. "Not at all, my lord. Read them. Honor them. Let them point you down the road. Only do not mistake the pointing finger for the journey itself. The sages would not wish to be kept upon a shelf. They would wish for you to go and see, with your own eyes, what they once saw." The king sat with this for a long while. Then he laid the scroll in his lap and looked out at the trees and at the half-finished wheel with the eyes of a man seeing something familiar in a new light. wheelwright was not saying that books are worthless or that we have nothing to gain from those who walked before us. He was saying that the most important thing cannot simply be received. It must be lived into. There is a teaching often heard in Zen that words are a finger pointing at the moon. The finger is useful. It tells us where to turn our eyes. But no one can see the moon on our behalf. We each have to look for ourselves. The Zen master Dogen, who brought the Soto tradition to Japan, taught something that surprised many who came to study with him. He said that practice and awakening are not two separate things. Most of us assume we practice now in order to become awakened later, as though the sitting and the searching were merely a fee we pay for some reward still to come. Dogen turned this completely around. Sincere practice, he said, is itself awakening. Each honest moment of attention is not one more step toward a far-off goal. It is the goal, arriving again in the present. This is a kind thing to hear if we allow it to settle. It means you are not failing simply because you have not arrived. The sincere effort you make today, the honest attention you bring to this very hour, is not somehow lesser than a grand awakening waiting in the distance. It is already whole in itself. This can change the entire feeling of a life. So much of our unease comes from the sense that we have not arrived yet. That real life, the finished and settled version of it, waits somewhere ahead, just past the point where we finally work everything out. But if the richness lives in the searching, then there is no other place we are required to be. The peace is here now, available in the honest looking itself, and not stored away only at the far end of the road. You may catch sight of this in the ordinary corners of your days. There is a particular contentment in being fully absorbed in something for its own sake. Preparing a meal slowly and with care, instead of rushing toward the eating. Walking somewhere without straining to be there already. Listening to another person with real interest, instead of waiting for the pause where you can speak. In moments like these, the goal loosens its hold, and you find yourself simply here, taking part in your own living. A musician knows this well. There is one kind of player who practices only to be praised on some distant day, and who suffers through every hour until that day arrives. And there is another kind, who loves the feel of the strings beneath the fingers this morning, the slow climb of a single phrase, the small daily progress that perhaps no one else will ever notice. The second player has already found what the first is still chasing. The joy was never waiting only in the great performance at the end. It was there in the practice room the whole time. The teaching of the Buddha has always pointed in this direction. It is called a path after all, and not a doorway. A path is something you walk. The walking is not a delay before the real thing begins. The walking is the real thing. There is comfort in this for anyone who feels they have fallen behind, who fears they have not yet understood enough or become enough. You are not behind. There is no line you were meant to have crossed by now. There is only this step, and then the next, taken with as much honesty and care as you can bring to it. That is not a lesser way to live. It may be the whole of it. You do not need to solve the great riddles of existence to feel this. You only need to keep asking them with an honest heart, and to notice that the asking, when it is sincere, is already a kind of coming home. Rest with me here, for a breath or two. Nothing needs solving in this moment. Feel yourself here, where you already are. We will walk on whenever it feels right. In a town among the hills there lived a tea master, known across the province for the calm he carried into every room. Among his few belongings was a single tea bowl, old and plain, the color of river clay. He had drunk from it for many years, and he loved it dearly. Everyone who knew him knew the bowl. One afternoon, a young woman came to take tea with him. She had heard of his peace of mind and wished to understand it for herself. As they sat together, she watched him cradle the worn bowl in both hands, turning it slowly, admiring it with open affection. This puzzled her. She had expected a man so free to have let go of attachments altogether. "Master," she said, "forgive me. People say you are the most contented man in the region, untroubled by gain or loss. Yet you hold that old bowl as though it were the most precious thing you own. Are you not afraid of the day it breaks?" The master smiled and set the bowl down between them. "This bowl," he said, "is already broken." She looked at it. It sat there whole, steam rising from the tea inside. "I do not understand. It is right here, unbroken. In my heart, it is already broken," he said. "From the first day I held it, I have known that one morning it will slip from my fingers, or crack in the cold, or be knocked from its shelf. All things made of clay return to dust in their time. Because I made peace with its breaking long ago, I am free to love it completely now, today, while it rests in my hands. I am not bracing against the loss. I have let the loss happen already, here inside me. And so all that remains is the enjoying." He lifted the bowl again and held it so she could see the small marks of its years. A person who cannot bear to lose a thing can never truly enjoy it. He spends his hours guarding it, fearing for it, holding his breath. But the one who has accepted that all things pass holds the very same bowl with an easy heart and tastes the tea all the sweeter for it. The young woman sat with this for a while, watching the steam curl up between them. "But does it not sadden you," she asked, "to think of it breaking, even now?" "Why should it?" The master said, "The breaking has not come. Only the tea has come, and this fine afternoon, and your good company. To grieve today for a loss that is not yet here would be to suffer the same thing twice. When the breaking arrives, I will meet it on that day. For now, I would rather simply drink my tea." He poured a little more into her cup. "Sorrow will call on its own morning. There is no need to invite it early." This is one of the most freeing turns the heart can make. We tend to believe that to protect what we love, we must hold it tightly and keep the thought of losing it far from our minds. But that fear is the very thing that robs us of what we love while it is still here. A clutching mind cannot enjoy. It is too busy bracing against tomorrow to taste today. This is the heart of what the Buddha called the cause of our suffering. It was not the changing of the world that he pointed to, but our grasping after it, the craving to hold and to keep, and the matching dread of losing and letting go. He never said that we should stop loving. He pointed to the grip itself, the tight fist of the heart that turns even our joys into worries. When the grip softens, the love remains. Only the fear falls away. You can see this in something as ordinary as a happy evening among friends. There is a way of passing such an evening where, even while you laugh, a small voice at the back of the mind is already mourning that the night will end. You are present and absent at once, half here and half braced for the goodbye. And there is another way, where you let the evening be exactly what it is while it lasts, knowing it will pass and loving it anyway. The first way carries a thread of sorrow through the middle of joy. The second is simply joy, whole and unguarded, for as long as the evening lasts. There is a freedom here that has nothing to do with owning less. You can hold the very same life, the same people, the same simple pleasures, and hold them with open hands. Nothing is taken from you. Only the dread is taken, that low and constant hum of fear that something might change. And once the dread loosens, what is left is a clearer and warmer enjoyment of all that is already here. Think of a man who spent his whole life trying to keep himself safe. He was a prosperous merchant in an old river town, and ever since he was young he had been frightened of losing what he had. So he set about making his life secure. He raised high walls around his house. He filled his storerooms with grain enough for 10 years. He bought locks to guard his locks. He drew up careful plans against every misfortune he could imagine, the floods and the droughts, the thieves and the hard winters. And still he could not rest. Each new thing he gained handed him one more thing to fear losing. The wealthier he grew, the less he slept. One evening a traveling teacher stopped at his gate, asking shelter for the night. The merchant, cautious as ever, questioned him closely before letting him in. Over a simple supper, the teacher noticed how the man's eyes kept moving to the windows, to the doors, to the heavy chests along the wall. "You have built yourself a strong house," the teacher said. "Why do you look so tired?" "Because there is always more to protect," the merchant answered. "The walls could be higher. The stores could be fuller. A man cannot be too careful." The teacher was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "May I tell you what I see? You have spent your life building a fortress to keep out loss. But loss is not waiting at your gate. It lives inside the walls with you, in your own fear. You have handed every single thing you own a blade to hold against you, because now you tremble at the thought of parting with any of it. You are not guarding your treasures. They are guarding you, and they have made you their prisoner." The merchant said nothing, but the words found their mark. "I carry almost nothing," the teacher went on, "and so there is almost nothing that can be taken from me. I am not telling you to empty your storerooms. Keep your grain. Keep your house. Only loosen your hold on them. Carry them as things you have been lent for a while, not as chains you must defend to your final breath. The moment you can let them go within your heart, they stop being a weight, and you are free to enjoy them at last." That night, for the first time in many years, the merchant slept without rising to check the locks. In the seasons that followed, he did not give away his house or his grain. He simply began to loosen his hold. He left his gate open to travelers, as it had been open to the teacher. He shared from his full storerooms when a neighbor's harvest failed. To his surprise, the more lightly he held what he owned, the more he was able to enjoy it. The walls that had once felt like the bars of a cage now felt like a home, because he was no longer their prisoner. He had spent half his life guarding his treasures. He spent the other half, far more happily, simply making use of them. There is a simple truth folded inside this. The more certainty we demand from life, the more we suffer, because life will not sign the contract we hold out to it. We want assurances that the people we love will stay, that our health will hold, that tomorrow will resemble today. When life cannot promise these things, we grow anxious and we grip harder. Yet the gripping changes nothing about what will come. It only crowds the present with worry. Think of how much of our worry is spent on futures that never arrive. We rehearse troubles that never come to pass. We lie awake defending ourselves against dangers that never knock at the door. And on the rare day, when a real difficulty does arrive, we find we have the strength to meet it then, in the moment itself, far more strength than all our worrying ever gave us. The worry never kept us safe. It only laid a second hardship on top of whatever life actually brought. A person who asks less of the future tends to suffer less in the present. This is not surrender, and it is not a cold heart. It is closer to trust. When you stop demanding that everything stay fixed and safe, you become free to meet your life as it actually arrives, with all of its turns. There is deep rest in setting down the impossible task of holding the whole world in place. You are never the one keeping it together. You can unclench your hands and find that life goes on holding you. This open-handed way of holding is gentlest and most tested with the people we love. A parent feels it keenly. To love a child is to watch that child change without pause, grow taller, grow into thoughts of their own, and one day walk their own road into a life you cannot follow. A parent who clings, who longs to keep the child small and close and unchanged, brings sorrow to them both. But a parent who loves with open hands gives the child room to become who they are, and treasures each passing version of them fully, without trying to press a single one in place forever. The same holds for everyone dear to us. We do not really possess the people we love. We are fortunate enough to walk beside them for a stretch of the road, and the love is in the walking together, not in the holding fast. You might catch the grip at work in small, ordinary moments. The tightening when a plan is threatened. The bracing when someone you love steps out the door. The worry that circles at night over things that are not even gone. None of this needs to be fought. It helps simply to notice it and then to ask, without any harshness, whether the holding on is truly keeping anything safe or only stealing the peace of this hour. And then, here and there, you might try holding something with open hands. A possession you treasure. A season of life you wish would never end. Even a person, loved without the cold thread of fear running through it. To love in this way is not to love less. It is, somehow, to love more freely, because the love is no longer tangled together with dread. You enjoy what is here while it is here. And when its time comes to change, as the time of all things does, you are not undone, because some part of you made peace with that long ago. This was the freedom the tea master had found. He held his old bowl as something already returned, already let go. And so, for as long as it lasted, every cup of tea was a small and unexpected gift, received with a full and easy heart. We even cling to ourselves, to a fixed picture of who we are and how we wish to be seen. We defend our pride, our reputation, our sense of being right, as fiercely as the merchant defended his gold. Yet these two are carried most happily with a loose hand. A person who does not need to be seen as anything in particular, who can be wrong without shame and passed over without injury, has a lightness about them that others feel the moment they enter a room. When we hold even our own selves with an easy grip, we stop flinching at every small slight, and a great deal of life's friction quietly falls away. None of this is something to force. The grip does not loosen because we scold ourselves for gripping. It loosens on its own, little by little, as we begin to trust that we can survive a loss, that we have met hard changes before and are still here. Each time we let something be exactly what it is and find that we are all right, the hands open a little more easily the next time. Let us settle here for a few breaths. Nothing to grasp at, nothing to keep. Let things be exactly as they are, and let yourself be here among them. There is no hurry at all. Move on only when you wish. A learned scholar once traveled many days to reach a teacher who lived high on a forested mountain. He was a clever man, quick with words, who had read a great many books. He arrived with a single demand. He wanted the highest truth, stated plainly, so that he could know it at last and be finished with searching. He climbed the long path, growing more impatient with every turn, and found the teacher sitting outside a small hut, doing nothing in particular. The scholar bowed, a little stiffly, and made his request. "I have studied for 30 years, he said. "I have read every book of wisdom I could find. I have come all this way for one thing only. Tell me the highest truth, the final answer, so that my searching can end." The teacher looked at him with kindness and was silent for a while. Then he said, "I cannot give you an answer to keep, but I can give you a question to carry. Will you take it?" The scholar frowned. He had wanted a conclusion, something solid he could set down in his mind and own forever. "A question? I have had my fill of questions. I came for an answer. The answer you want would become a dead thing the moment I handed it to you," the teacher said. "You would write it down, agree with it, and stop looking. But a living question keeps you awake. It walks beside you. Here is the one I carry and offer now to you. Whatever rises up before you, in each moment of your days, ask softly, 'What is this?' Not to find a clever reply, only to meet what is truly here, fresh, before you decide that you already know it." The teacher reached up and drew down a leaf from the branch above him, turning it slowly in the light. "I have seen 10,000 leaves," he said, "and still I do not truly know what this one is. That is why the world has never once bored me." The scholar was not satisfied, but he had come a very long way, and so he agreed to try. He carried the small question down the mountain and back into his busy life. At first it felt like nothing, an empty habit, but slowly it began to change his days. Pausing at his window in the morning, he would ask, "What is this?" and the ordinary street below would seem to wake up and meet him. Listening to a song he thought he knew by heart, he would ask, "What is this?" and hear a turn in it he had been deaf to for years. Walking a road he had taken 1,000 times, he would ask, "What is this?" and see a tree that had stood there longer than he had been alive, which he had somehow never once noticed. Years afterward, he said the teacher had given him something far better than the answer he had demanded. An answer would have let him fall asleep. The question kept him awake to his own life until the end of his days. There is a kind of question that is not hunting for an answer at all. We are used to questions as problems to be solved, closed the moment the reply is found. But in Zen, there is another use for a question. It is held open, on purpose, and carried like a companion. It is not meant to settle anything. It is meant to keep us close to life. Such questions are sometimes called koans. A koan is not a riddle with a hidden solution that a clever mind can crack. It is closer to a doorway you are asked to stand within. "What is this?" is among the oldest of them. So is the question, "Who am I?" really. The aim is not to reach a tidy reply, The aim is that the asking itself wakes you up. It returns you, again and again, to the bare fact of this moment, before your ideas come rushing in to explain it away. We can feel the difference in the smallest things. Imagine you are handed a piece of fruit you have eaten 100 times. If you say to yourself at once, "This is an apple," the matter is closed, and you eat it without really tasting it. But if you let the question come instead, "What is this?" you might notice the cool weight of it in your palm, its faint sweet scent, the particular color of its skin, the first bright snap of flavor as you bite. Nothing about the fruit has changed. Only your knowing has stepped aside long enough for you to actually meet it. The Zen master Dogen had a name for this. He called it the issue at hand. He taught that awakening is not waiting in some special elsewhere, but is found in whatever stands directly before you, this very moment, fully met. The cup in your hand, the face across the table, the breath as it moves in and out. Each one is the issue at hand. Each is asking, in its own wordless voice, "What is this?" And to meet it with real attention, without hurrying to name it, is already the whole of the path. This sounds lofty, but it is the most homely thing in the world. The issue at hand might be the warm water moving over your fingers as you wash a bowl. It might be the weight of a tired child leaning against your side, or the first sip of something hot on a cold morning, or the sound of rain finding the roof. We so often treat these moments as the dull spaces between the important things, to be hurried through on the way to somewhere better. But there is no somewhere better. There is only ever this, the thing that is actually happening, quietly asking to be met. A whole life can slip by in the waiting room of the mind, forever on the way to a moment that matters more, while the moments that were truly here go unlived. To stop, even briefly, and receive what is in front of you is to step out of that waiting room and into your own life. There is a story told in Zen of a young monk who set out one morning on a long pilgrimage. He was leaving the monastery in the thin light before sunrise, his staff in his hand and his bowl at his hip, his heart full of grand hopes for all he would learn. An older monk was sweeping the path near the gate. This elder had walked many such journeys in his own youth and had long since stopped needing to go anywhere at all. He paused, leaning on his broom, as the young man approached. "Where are you going?" the elder asked. "On pilgrimage," the young monk said. "And what is the purpose of this pilgrimage? What do you hope to find?" The young monk had his answer ready, for he had rehearsed it often. "I am going to study the great teachings," he said, "to deepen my understanding and to find the truth." The elder said nothing. He only looked at him. So the young monk tried again, offering a finer answer, full of the right words about wisdom and awakening. Still, the elder was not satisfied. The young man grew flustered. He gave a third answer, and then a fourth, each one more polished than the last, and each met with the same patient silence. It was a strange thing. The harder he tried to give a worthy answer, the further away the elder's eyes seemed to drift, as if every clever phrase set one more stone in a wall between them. At last the young monk let his shoulders drop. He stopped reaching for the right thing to say. "Truly," he admitted, "I do not know." The elder smiled, warm and pleased, as though the young man had finally said something real. "Not knowing," he said, "is most intimate." The young monk stood with those words at the gate, while the morning mist began to lift. All his careful answers had kept him one step removed from his own journey, busy describing it instead of living it. But the moment he confessed that he did not know, he was suddenly right up close to everything. The cool air, the road unrolling ahead, the open and uncertain day. His not knowing had carried him nearer to the truth than all his knowing ever had. Not knowing is most intimate. It sounds strange when we first hear it, because we are taught that knowing is what brings us closest to things. But a firm label can hold us at arm's length. The moment we are sure we have something figured out, a kind of door closes. We file the thing away under its name and look elsewhere, satisfied that we already understand it. Not knowing keeps that door open. Meeting a person, or an hour of your day, or even a thought passing through your mind, without the certainty that you have already grasped it, you are drawn in close, because now you have to actually look in order to see. This is not the anxious not knowing of confusion, the kind that leaves us lost and grasping for solid ground. It is a warm and open not knowing, a readiness to be surprised by what is here. And there is great relief in it. We carry such a heavy load, believing we must have all the answers, must always understand, must never be caught not knowing. To lay that weight down for a while, and to say simply and honestly, I do not know, can feel like a full breath drawn at last, after holding it far too long. Consider how much effort we pour into seeming certain. In conversation we rush to have an opinion, to sound as though we have everything worked out, half afraid that not knowing will look like weakness. We tire ourselves defending views we are not even sure we hold. There is a sweetness in setting that down. To be able to say, I had not thought of it that way, or I am not sure, or I simply do not know, is no weakness at all. It is the openness of a person still willing to learn, still able to be surprised, still living close to the edge of things, rather than walled up behind their conclusions. The Korean Zen master Sung San spent his life pointing his students toward exactly this. Keep don't know mind, he would tell them. Only don't know. In that open, unhurried not knowing, he said, everything you truly need is already present. None of this has to become a discipline. It can be as light as a flavor you bring to an ordinary moment. Standing at a window, you might let the small question rise, almost without words. What is this? And for a single breath, the view is allowed to be new. A sound from the next room, met with the same openness, before you have decided what it is. The face of someone you have known for years, met as a question rather than a settled conclusion, so that you genuinely see them, perhaps for the first time in a long while. There is no strain in any of this. You are not asked to keep the question every moment or to hold it correctly. It is enough to let it surface now and then, as a window is opened to let in air. What is this? 3 small words that loosen the grip of the familiar and let a little wonder back in. The world has not gone anywhere. It has been here all along, waiting only for us to look at it as though we did not already know it by heart. There is real kindness in this toward your own life. So much of our experience slips past unlived, simply because we are sure we already know it. The small question slows that rushing certainty and lets the moment open again. You might think, so small a thing could not change much. But the quality of a life is made of its moments, and the moments are made of how we meet them. To meet even a handful of them freshly, here and there across a day, is to begin living a little more of your life as it actually happens. That is no small thing. It may be the whole difference between passing through your days and truly being here for them. The scholar who climbed the mountain had come looking for an answer that would let him finally stop. What he received instead was far better, a living question that kept him awake to the whole of his life. Pause with me here a moment. Set down, just for now, everything you feel sure of. Rest in the not knowing, open and unhurried. Whenever you are ready, we will continue. Among the craftsmen of an old kingdom, one woodworker was spoken of above all the rest. He shaped beams and joints and fine furniture, and what amazed people most was not only the beauty of his work, but the ease of it. He never seemed to struggle. His tools, it was said, lasted far longer than any other craftsman's, though he used them every single day for 40 years. A young apprentice came to learn from him, eager and a little impatient. In his first days, he watched the master work, and he could not understand what he was seeing. The master would pick up a length of wood, turn it over in his hands, study it for a long moment, and only then begin. His blade seemed to glide. The wood opened almost willingly under his hands, curling away in clean ribbons. There was no forcing, no sweat, no fighting the grain. When the apprentice's own turn came, he did the opposite. He gripped his tools tightly and drove them hard into the wood, determined to make it obey. His blade caught and stuck. The wood split in the wrong places. By the end of the day, his hands ached, his tools were dull and chipped, and his work was rough and clumsy. "Master," he said at last, "I push with all my strength, and the wood fights me. You barely seem to touch it, and it yields. What is your secret?" The old man set down his tools and smiled. "When I was young," he said, "I worked just as you do now. I saw only a block of wood to be conquered, and I attacked it. I broke many blades and wore myself to exhaustion. But over the years I stopped fighting. Now, when I take up a piece of wood, I do not begin by deciding what I will do to it. I look at it first. I find where it is already willing to open, the lines and the grain that are there before I ever touch it. Then I set my blade where the wood itself invites it, and I follow. I am not forcing my shape onto the wood. I am answering what is already there." He ran his hand along a smooth, finished beam. "And every piece is different. This one is not that one. If I came to each with the same fixed plan, I would be fighting them all. So I meet each one as it is and let it show me where to cut. That is why my blade stays sharp. It never strikes where the wood resists. It only moves where the wood agrees." The apprentice did not understand all of this at once. For a long while he kept forcing, out of old habit, and kept breaking his blades. But slowly, season after season, he began to slow down before he started. He learned to look at a piece of wood and wait until he could see where it wished to give. The day came, many years later, when a younger student watched him work and marveled at how easy he made it appear, and asked him the very same question he had once asked his own teacher. He smiled and gave very nearly the same answer. There is a phrase from Zen that holds the heart of this. A student once asked a master to gather the whole of his many years of practice into a few words. The master answered, "An appropriate response." That was all. The entire path folded into the art of meeting each moment with exactly what it asks for, nothing forced, nothing left over. We spend so much of our lives doing the opposite. We arrive at each situation with a plan already formed, a fixed idea of how it ought to go, and then we press that idea onto whatever is in front of us, whether it fits or not. Like the young apprentice, we grip hard and drive forward, and then we are surprised when life resists us. We are trying to cut against the grain. An appropriate response begins with seeing what is actually here, this person, this moment, this particular situation, before we decide what to do about it. When we truly look first, the fitting response often becomes clear on its own. It rises out of the situation rather than being forced upon it. This is why real wisdom can look so simple from the outside, even effortless. It is not that the wise have more strength than the rest of us. It is that they waste none of it fighting what is there. They have learned to find the opening a moment already offers. Think of a disagreement with someone you love. There is a way of meeting it where you arrive already armed with your conclusion, pushing your point harder and harder, certain that if you only press enough, they will finally see. It rarely works. The other person braces and pushes back, and you both end up further apart than before. But there is another path, where you set your prepared speech aside for a moment and actually listen, searching for what the other person truly feels beneath their words. When you answer what is really there, instead of the argument you came ready to win, something often softens between you. You found the opening rather than battering at the wall. Or think of trying to comfort someone in pain. If you rush in with advice, eager to fix the feeling and make it go away, you are often responding to your own discomfort rather than to them. They feel unheard and draw further inward. But if you sit with them and simply meet them where they actually are, asking nothing of their sorrow, your presence itself becomes the thing they needed. You did less, and it helped more, because you answered the real moment instead of the one you wished were happening. Notice, too, that for the woodworker, the seeing and the doing were not two separate steps. He did not first understand the wood and then, much later, act on his understanding. The looking and the cutting were nearly a single motion. This is worth resting on for a moment. We often imagine that we must first reach some deep understanding, often private, and only afterward carry it into our lives. But true seeing and true action are not so far apart. They arise together. To really see what a moment needs is already to begin responding to it. A master once lived beside a river, known across the province for the clarity of his counsel. One morning, two travelers came to him, arriving by different roads, neither one knowing the other. As it happened, each carried the very same question. The first to arrive was a restless man, forever busy, his mind scattered across 100 plans at once. He bowed and asked, "Master, how should I live? Should I throw myself fully into the world, or should I withdraw from it to find peace?" The master regarded him a while, then said, "Withdraw. Sit still. Spend less of your time rushing about and more of it in stillness. That is your way." The man thanked him and left. Not long after, the second traveler arrived. He was a timid, retiring man who had spent years alone and grown fearful of the world beyond his door. He bowed and asked the identical question, "Master, how should I live? Should I throw myself fully into the world, or should I withdraw from it to find peace?" The master regarded him a while, then said, "Go out. Step into the world. Spend less of your time alone and offer yourself to the life around you. That is your way." A servant who tended the master's garden had overheard them both, and he was thoroughly puzzled. Once the second man had gone, he came forward. Master, forgive me. Two men asked you the same question this morning, word for word. To one you said withdraw, and to the other you said go out. How can a single question have two opposite answers? The Master smiled. Because they are not the same man. The first was drowning in the world and needed stillness. The second was hiding from it and needed to step forward. The questions sounded alike in their mouths, but their lives were not alike. A remedy that heals one person may harm another. There is no single answer that fits every life. There is only the response that this person, in this moment, truly needs. The servant bowed and went back to his garden. But he carried the lesson with him, and from that day on, when someone came to him troubled, he no longer reached for the first ready answer. He looked, first, at the person standing in front of him. The Buddha himself was often likened to a skilled physician. He did not press the same remedy on everyone who came to him. He looked at each person, saw what particular trouble of the heart they carried, and offered the medicine that would help that one. To a person swollen with pride, he might teach humility. To a person bent low with shame, he might teach kindness toward oneself. The teaching was always shaped to the one who stood before him. This is sometimes called skillful means, and it is simply the appropriate response raised to an art. But there is something further here, and it reaches into the center of a whole life. It is one thing to understand a truth, and quite another to live it. A person might sit alone and feel a boundless calm, even a boundless love for all the world, while no one else is near. That is a beautiful thing. Yet the real test and the real fulfillment comes when that person rises, walks out the door, and meets an ordinary day, with its delays and its disappointments and its difficult people. Can the calm survive the crowded market? Can the love reach the neighbor who is hard to love? We have all known the gap between the two. A calm that holds only until someone cuts ahead of us in line. A patience that lasts until our own child tests it for the 100th time. There is no shame in this. It is simply where the real work lives, out in the friction of ordinary days and not apart from it. The crowded market and the difficult neighbor are not interruptions of the path. They are the path. The very place where whatever we have understood is given the chance to become real. The insight we find in stillness is only half of the matter. The other half is what becomes of it when we move back into our lives. And here is a quietly encouraging thing. The two halves feed one another. Each time we manage to carry a little of our understanding into how we actually act, the understanding itself grows deeper and steadier. And the deeper it grows, the more naturally it flows into what we do. Realizing and living are not a straight road with a finish at the end. They circle back on each other, turning round and round, each one strengthening its partner. None of this is to be forced, of course. Forcing would be the very opposite of what these stories are pointing toward. It is more an invitation to notice. When you next feel yourself straining against a situation, pushing hard to make it go the way you had planned, you might pause and look again at what is genuinely in front of you. Often there is an opening you had not seen, a path through that asks far less effort, because it follows the grain of what is really there instead of fighting it. And when some understanding visits you in a calm moment, a flash of patience or clarity or warmth towards someone, you might let it travel a little further than the still room where it arrived. Let it become a single small act, a softer word than you might have chosen, a moment of real attention given to someone who needed it. The understanding does not have to remain a private feeling. It can become a response, and in becoming one, it grows more truly your own. It helps to remember that an appropriate response is usually a small and unspectacular thing. It rarely looks heroic. Sometimes the most fitting answer to a moment is to say nothing at all, or to wait, or simply to let something be. Responding well does not always mean doing more. Often it means doing only what the moment actually asks, and not a bit more than that, which is its own quiet kind of skill. This is how a life slowly changes. Not in great leaps, but through countless small responses, each one a little more fitting and a little less forced than it might once have been. Take a moment here and let everything rest. Nothing to do, nothing to push against. Let the breath move on its own and sit with things just as they are. We will go on once you feel settled. A young man once set out to find a teacher worthy of his devotion. He had heard of many famous masters, each praised for something different. One was said to sit in meditation for days on end without ever moving. Another could answer any question that was put to him, however difficult. A third had great crowds of followers and a reputation that spread across the land. The young man did not know how to choose among them. How could he tell which of these masters had truly found wisdom and which had only its appearance? He brought his trouble to an old woman in his village, a person of few words whom everyone widely respected, though she held no title and taught no classes. He told her of the famous masters and their gifts, and asked which sign he ought to trust. The long stillness, the clever answers, the great following. She thought for a moment. "None of those will tell you what you wish to know," she said. "A person can sit as still as a stone and remain hard within. A person can answer every question ever asked and never once have softened their own heart. And a crowd, you know, will gather around almost anything. Then how am I to know?" The young man asked. "Watch them," she said. "Not for an hour and not for a day. Watch them across many seasons. See how they treat the people who can do nothing for them. See whether they are patient with the slow and kind to the ones who have stumbled. See if they are good on ordinary days when no one important is looking and there is nothing at all to be gained. A teaching can be memorized. Stillness can be practiced for show. But the way a person treats a tired servant, or a stranger at the gate, or anyone who has nothing to give back, that cannot be counterfeited for long. Sooner or later, what a person truly is comes out in how they treat the ones with the least power to repay them. Notice whether the people who live closest to them, year upon year, are made brighter by their company, or worn down by it. The young man sat with this. It was not the answer he had expected. He had wanted a single, dramatic sign. Instead, she had handed him something slower and truer. "So wisdom," he said slowly, "is not really in what a person can do. It is in how they treat the people around them. Wisdom that has not yet become kindness," the old woman said, "is not yet ripe." This is one of the clearest signs we are ever given. All the calm and all the insight in the world have not finished their work until they have softened into kindness. In the Buddhist tradition, the awakened life is often pictured as a bird with two wings. One wing is wisdom, the clear seeing of how things truly are. The other wing is compassion, the warm turning of the heart toward others. A bird needs both wings to fly. Wisdom without compassion grows cold and distant. Compassion without wisdom can lose its footing. Joined together, they lift a person into something whole. You have surely felt the difference yourself, on both sides of it. Think of a time when someone met you with real kindness, when you had nothing to offer them in return, no usefulness, no reward, perhaps not even much gratitude to spare in that moment. Such kindness can stay with us for years. And think too of how it feels to be near a person who is clever and accomplished, but cold, who somehow makes you feel like one more task to be managed. All their gifts cannot quite make up for the missing warmth. We know in our bones which of the two we would call wise. It is easy to be impressed by the dramatic forms of the spiritual life, the deep stillness, the profound words, the unshakable calm. These can be real and good, but they can also be polished on the surface while the heart underneath stays untouched. A person may earn a great name for peacefulness and still be short with a struggling stranger. The truer measure is humbler and far harder to counterfeit. It shows in the small treatment of ordinary people, and most of all, in how we treat those who can offer us nothing at all. There was a woman who had everything she thought she wanted, and yet could find no happiness in any of it. She lived in a fine house in a prosperous town. Her storerooms were full. Her garden was the envy of her neighbors, and she wanted for nothing she could name. But a heaviness sat upon her, a flatness she could neither explain nor shake off. She tried to cure it as many of us do. She bought beautiful things. She filled her days with pleasures and entertainments. None of it reached the dull ache underneath. In time, she became convinced that some last piece of happiness must exist somewhere that she had simply not yet acquired, and she could not understand why it kept slipping through her fingers. At last, she went to see a hermit who lived simply at the forest's edge, and she asked him plainly how to find the contentment that had escaped her all her life. The hermit did not offer her a teaching. Instead, he asked her to do something. For one season, he said, each day, find a single person whose load is heavy and lighten it a little. Expect nothing back. Tell no one what you have done. Then return and tell me what you have found. She thought it a strange sort of prescription, but she was weary enough to try. The first days felt awkward and small. She helped an elderly neighbor carry water from the well. She sat with a sick child through a long afternoon so its tired mother could finally rest. She shared bread from her full table with a traveler who had none. She listened, truly listened, to someone everyone else had long since stopped hearing. At first, she did these things almost as a duty, watching herself from the outside, waiting to feel something. But somewhere along the way, the watching fell away, and she became simply absorbed in the small needs in front of her, forgetting herself for whole afternoons together. As the weeks went on, something she had not expected began to stir. The heaviness in her chest started to lift. On the evenings, after she had eased someone's burden, she slept deeply and woke feeling lighter. She found she was thinking less about the missing piece of her own happiness and more about the people whose paths crossed hers each day. By the end of the season, the ache that had shadowed her for years had loosened its grip, almost without her noticing it go. She came back to the hermit. "I came to you searching for happiness," she said, as though it were a thing I might find and keep for myself. But the harder I reached for it, the further it fled from me. It was only when I stopped reaching and turned toward others instead that it quietly arrived. The hermit nodded. "Happiness is not gathered," he said. "It is not a treasure you can store in a locked room. It is closer to warmth. A heart that holds only for itself grows cold and stale. A heart that gives itself away stays warm, and the warmth returns to the giver many times over. You were never meant to be a sealed vessel. You were made to pour out and to be filled again in the pouring. But I told no one, and I expected nothing," she said. "Was that the heart of it? Was that the heart of it?" "That was the whole of it," the hermit replied. "A gift given to be seen is a kind of trade. A gift given quietly, asking for nothing, is the only kind that warms the one who gives it. You were not buying anyone's thanks. You were simply letting your heart do what it was always made to do." There is something in this that cuts against what the world so often tells us. We are taught, in 100 unspoken ways, that happiness is something we secure for ourselves, by gaining, by winning, by coming out ahead of others. And so we pour our energy inward, trying to fill our own cup first. Yet the strange and lovely truth, which nearly every tradition of wisdom has stumbled upon, is that this is very nearly backward. The Buddhist sage Shantideva, who lived long ago and wrote with great tenderness about the awakening heart, said it plainly. "All the happiness there is in the world," he taught, "arises from wishing well to others. And all the sorrow there is in the world arises from wishing only for oneself. When we turn our care toward the good of others, something in us unclenches and opens, and happiness slips in almost as if by accident. When we curl tightly around our own wanting, we grow anxious and small, and the very happiness we are chasing can find no room to enter. It helps to understand why this should be so. When our attention is fixed on ourselves, on our wants, our worries, our old wounds, the self seems to swell until it fills the whole of our view, and a swollen self is a heavy and anxious thing to carry everywhere. But when we turn toward another person and truly attend to them, for a little while, we are set down. We forget ourselves, in the best sense of that phrase. The constant low ache of self-concern falls silent, and in that silence, there is room for something lighter to enter. This is part of why kindness feels good. For a moment, it relieves us of the exhausting labor of being endlessly preoccupied with ourselves. The Buddha taught a practice of loving kindness, of warmly wishing that all beings, ourselves among them, might be well, might be at peace, might be free of suffering. It is not a grand or difficult thing. It is simply the heart turning outward, remembering that every person it meets is carrying some hidden weight, and wishing them well regardless. A heart that lives this way is not emptied by it. It is fed. To care for others turns out to be one of the deepest ways of caring for ourselves. None of this asks us to become saints. It does not call for great sacrifices or grand gestures. The kindness that ripens a life is made mostly of small things. A few minutes of real attention offered to someone who is lonely. A word of encouragement to a person who is struggling. The patience to be gentle with someone who is difficult, remembering that they too carry burdens we cannot see. Letting another go ahead of you. Forgiving a small wrong instead of nursing it through the night. You might simply begin to notice, here and there, the chances that arise to ease another person's load, the ones we so often hurry straight past without seeing them at all. And you might notice too, how you feel afterward when you do reach out. there is usually a small warmth that follows an act of kindness, a sense of rightness, as though some part of you recognizes that this is what it was always for. And it asks no special conditions of us. You do not have to wait until you feel wise enough, or calm enough, or until your own life is finally in good order. Kindness can begin exactly where you are, today, in whatever state you actually find yourself. In fact, on the days when your own heart feels heaviest, a small turn towards someone else is often the very thing that lightens it. We do not give because we have already arrived somewhere. We give, and the giving itself becomes part of how we arrive. The long journey of seeing freshly, of holding lightly, of meeting each moment with an open question, comes to rest here, in something very simple. A heart that has been softened by all that looking does not keep its softness to itself. It turns toward the people nearby and wishes them well, and helps where it can. And in the helping, without ever setting out to find it, the heart comes upon the very peace it once went searching for in distant places. Stay here a moment with me. If you like, bring one person to mind and wish them well. Then, in your own time, we will continue on. High in the mountains stood an old monastery, and every morning before the sun had fully risen, a great bronze bell was struck to begin the day. Its deep voice rolled out across the valley, and the monks rose to greet the morning. Most of them had heard that bell many thousands of times. After so many years, they barely noticed it anymore. It had become part of the background, no more remarkable than the creak of a floorboard or the sound of their own footsteps. They rose at its call out of habit, their minds already running ahead into the day, and the bell passed almost unheard. But there was one old monk, the eldest in the monastery, who was different. Every single morning, when the bell sounded, he would stop whatever he was doing, lift his head, and listen with his whole being, as though he had never heard such a sound in all his life. His face would soften. Sometimes his eyes would shine. A young novice, watching him one morning, could not understand it at all. "Forgive me," the novice said later. "You have heard that bell every day for 60 years. The rest of us stopped noticing it long ago. Yet each morning you listen as if it were the very first time. How is that possible? Surely by now it is just a bell." The old monk smiled. "To you it is just a bell," he said, "because you expect it to be the same as yesterday's. You heard it once, long ago, and ever since you have only been hearing your memory of it. But I do not listen to my memory. I listen to this bell, this morning. And this morning's bell has never been struck before. The air it travels through is not the same air. The light is not the same light. I am not the same man I was yesterday. So how could it be the same sound? Each morning it is entirely new, if only I am willing to truly hear it." He turned back toward the open window, where the first gold of dawn was touching the hills. "Most people," he said, "pass their whole lives half asleep, certain they have already heard everything and seen everything. They are listening to their memories. But the world is not a memory. It is happening right now, fresh, for the first and only time. I am simply trying not to sleep through it." The novice bowed and said nothing more. But the next morning, when the bell rang out across the valley, he found himself, for the first time in a long while, truly listening. And he was surprised to discover that the old monk was right. He had heard that bell 1,000 times. He had never once heard it as he heard it now. There is something both tender and a little sad in what the old monk said. The mind has a habit, a useful one in its way, of growing numb to whatever repeats. The first time we hear a certain sound, or taste a certain food, or walk a certain road, our attention is wide awake. But repeat it enough, and the mind quietly files it away as known and stops truly meeting it. This spares us a great deal of effort. We could not function if every footstep astonished us. Yet it comes at a hidden cost. Little by little, the most familiar parts of our lives become invisible to us, precisely because they are familiar. We move through our own days half awake, attending to our memories instead of to what is actually in front of us. You can feel this in small ways. Think of a drive you have made 100 times, arriving with no memory at all of the journey, as though you slept through it with your eyes open. Or a song you once loved and played so often that now you can hear it without hearing a single note of it. The world had not changed. Your attention had simply gone to sleep. There is no fault in this. The mind is only doing what it learned to do, setting the familiar aside so it can attend to whatever seems new or urgent. But somewhere in that sorting, a great deal of ordinary beauty gets set aside as well, marked as already known and never looked at again. We can live for years beside a great beauty, a mountain, a shoreline, a garden we planted with our own hands, and stop noticing that it is even there. Familiarity is not the enemy. It is only that we mistake having seen a thing once for having truly seen it. It is worth remembering what the word Buddha actually means. It does not name a god or some distant holy figure. It means, quite simply, one who is awake. The whole of this path, in a sense, is just the slow work of waking up, of stepping out of the half-sleep of habit and meeting our own life directly while it is happening. Not someday. Now. This morning's bell, this breath, this light on the wall. In Zen monasteries, a bell is rung not only to mark the passing of the hours, but to call the mind home, to wake it from its wandering and return it to the present. Each chime carries a silent invitation. Are you here? Are you awake? Almost the whole of the path could be folded into that one ringing question. And here is the good news folded inside it. Wonder is not something we must travel far to find. We do not need a more exotic life, a grander view, a rarer experience. The ordinary, met with a waking mind, is already astonishing. The trouble was never that our lives became dull. It was only that we stopped showing up to them. Picture a prince who had tasted everything the world could offer, and yet was bored by all of it. He had grown up surrounded by every pleasure. The finest food was set before him at every meal. Musicians played for him whenever he wished. He had seen great spectacles, owned beautiful things, traveled to famous places, and somewhere along the way, all of it had stopped meaning anything to him. The food no longer tasted of much. The music was only noise. While still a young man, he felt as though he had already used the world up and that nothing remained which could move him. A grey flatness had settled over his days, and he did not know how to lift it. He heard of a hermit who lived alone in the hills, in a small hut with almost nothing, and who was said to be the happiest man anyone had ever met. This puzzled the prince so deeply that he set out to see for himself. How could a man with nothing be content when he, with everything, was not? The hermit welcomed him simply, and shared what he had, which was very little. A piece of coarse bread, cool water from a spring, a place to sit as the evening came on. The prince was unimpressed and a little offended, but he stayed because he had nowhere better to be. That first night he lay awake on the hard floor, restless and irritated, already composing the complaints he would make when he returned home. As they sat together, the hermit ate his plain bread slowly, as though it were the finest dish in the world. He drank his water with open delight. When the evening light spread gold across the hills, he grew still and watched it with the wide-open face of a child. When a bird sang somewhere in the dusk, he tilted his head to listen and smiled. At first the prince thought the old man simple, perhaps a little mad. But as the days went by, something strange began to happen. The hermit's delight was catching. Sitting beside him, the prince found himself actually tasting his bread and noticing, with surprise, that it was good. He heard the spring water moving over the stones. He watched the sunset for the first time in years and felt something stir in his chest that he had believed long dead. On his last evening there, the prince finally asked, "How is it that you, who have so little, find so much joy in it, while I, who have everything, find joy in none of it?" The hermit considered him with kindness. "You have so much," he said, "that you have stopped seeing any of it. Each new pleasure only left you hungry for the next, and so you never once tasted the one already in your hand. I have little, and so I have learned to receive it completely. The world did not grow dull for you, my friend. Your seeing grew dull. Wonder is not something the world owes you. It is something you give back to the world by truly meeting it. Look at one small thing as though it were the only thing, and you will find the whole of it shining there." This is one of the overlooked secrets of a contented life. We tend to chase wonder by reaching always for the new and the rare. We imagine that if only we could see grander sights, taste richer things, gather more remarkable experiences, then at last we would feel fully alive. But the bored prince shows us where that road runs. The more we consume, the more numb we can grow, until even marvels leave us cold. The other direction is open to anyone, and it costs nothing at all. It is simply to take the ordinary things already in our hands and receive them fully. There is a teaching found in many corners of the world that the truest miracle is not walking on water or moving a mountain. The truest miracle is to be here, on the earth, awake, tasting our food, feeling the warmth of the sun, hearing another person's voice, alive in a body on a turning world. These are not small things. We have only called them small because they are common. But common is not the same as small. The sunrise is common. The breath is common. A friend's face is common. And each one, truly received, is a marvel we did nothing to earn. The Buddha taught a path of mindfulness, of bringing a full and kindly attention to whatever is happening in the present moment. At its heart, this is not some grim discipline. It is closer to a homecoming, a return to the aliveness we all knew as children, before the world became familiar and we slowly stopped looking at it. Something close to gratitude lives at the center of this. When you truly receive an ordinary thing, a mouthful of warm food, a square of sunlight on the floor, the plain gift of another calm morning, a natural thankfulness tends to rise on its own. Not the dutiful gratitude we sometimes try to force, but the real thing, which arrives unbidden the moment we actually notice what we have. So much of what we long for, we are already holding. We have only mislaid it beneath the dust of the familiar. You do not need to manufacture wonder or strain to feel something grand. It is more a matter of pausing, here and there, and letting a single ordinary thing fully reach you. The warmth of a cup held in both hands on a cold morning. The sound of rain you have heard 1,000 times, suddenly really heard. The taste of that first sip of water when you are genuinely thirsty. A patch of light moving slowly across the floor as the afternoon passes. None of this asks for extra time or any special place. It asks only that, now and then, you stop listening to your memory of a thing and let the thing itself arrive. When you do, you may find that the bell of this very moment, whatever it happens to be, has never once been struck before and will never be struck again in quite this way. To hear it, just once, as if for the first time, is to be fully alive, if only for a breath. And a life made of such breaths is a rich one, however ordinary it may look from the outside. There is a kindness in this that is easy to overlook. It means a good life is not waiting somewhere far ahead after some great change, in some better place than this one. It is here, in the plain materials of an ordinary day, asking only to be noticed. You are not missing it because it is absent. It is all around you. It simply asks to be met. Let everything grow still for a moment. Listen, if you like, to whatever sound is nearest you now, as if you had never heard it before. Stay with it as long as you like, and we will carry on after. Here is a question that seems simple until you sit with it. Who are you? Not your name, which was given to you by others. Not your work, which you could set down tomorrow. Not even your body, which is not the same body you had as a child, having renewed and remade itself many times over. When you put all of that to one side and look for the one who remains, the one you call I, what do you actually find? It is a question worth holding lightly, not to trouble yourself with it, but because the answer, or the gentle lack of one, turns out to be a doorway to a quiet kind of freedom. There is an old tale, told in many lands, of a stream that set out from the mountains. It was a lively stream, and on its way down from the heights, it had crossed every kind of country. It had tumbled over rocks, slipped through green meadows, and carved its path through shadowed forests. It had never yet met an obstacle it could not flow around or over, and so it had come to believe that it knew itself completely. I am a stream, it said. I flow. That is what I am, and that is what I do. Then one day, it reached the edge of a vast desert. Confident as ever, it rushed forward to cross. But as its waters ran out onto the burning sand, they vanished. The harder the stream poured itself forward, the more it disappeared into the endless dryness, until it was in danger of vanishing altogether. It drew back, frightened and bewildered. This had never happened before. Nothing in all its long journey had prepared it for this. As it lingered at the desert's edge, losing heart, it heard a whisper. The sound seemed to rise from the sand itself, or perhaps from the warm wind moving across it. The wind crosses the desert, the whisper said, and so can you. But the wind can fly, said the stream. I can only flow. I am a stream. You cannot cross as a stream, said the whisper. If you hurl yourself at the sand as you are, you will only be swallowed up. But if you let the wind lift you, if you allow yourself to rise and be carried, you will cross over and fall again as rain on the far mountains. There you will gather and run and be a stream once more. The stream was afraid. But how will I know that I am still myself? If I give up my form, if I rise into the air and become something I have never been, will I not lose myself altogether? Will I still be me on the other side? The whisper was patient. You believe you are the particular shape you take here, in this bed of stones. But that is not what you are. Whether you rush over rocks, or rise as mist, or fall as rain, or rest in a still pool, the deepest part of you goes on. Your form will change. What you truly are will not. You are not the shape. You are what moves through every shape. For a long while the stream hesitated. To rise up, to surrender the only form it had ever known, felt like a kind of ending. But the desert would not be crossed in any other way. At last, trembling, it let go. It allowed the warm wind to draw its waters up into the air until it became a soft drift of mist and was carried out over the burning sands. In time, far away above the distant mountains, the mist cooled and gathered and fell as rain. The water came together once more and ran down the far slopes and was a stream again, singing over new stones in a new country. It had crossed the impossible desert, and it understood now that it had never truly been the form it once clung to. It had only ever been the living water, free to move through 1,000 shapes and still, always, remain itself. The stream believed it was its shape. We make the very same assumption about ourselves all the time. We believe we are a fixed and solid thing, a self that has stayed exactly the same through all our years and that must be guarded and defended at every turn. But where is this unchanging self? The Buddha looked very closely at this question and taught something he called not self. It is one of his most freeing teachings, though it can sound strange when we first meet it. When we search inside for a permanent, separate self, a solid I seated at the center of everything, we never quite find it. We find thoughts, but the thoughts are forever changing. We find feelings, but they arrive and depart like passing weather. We find memories, sensations, plans, a flowing river of experience. But the fixed self we assumed was running the whole show, the unchanging thing we have spent our lives defending, is nowhere to be found when we actually look for it. There is only this living, changing flow, the water moving through its 1,000 forms. You can sense this for yourself in a small way. Try, for a moment, to find the exact place where you end and the rest of the world begins. The air you are breathing now was, an instant ago, simply the air of the room. Soon it will be part of you, and then it will be the room's again. The food that becomes your body was a field of grain not long ago. We are not the sealed, separate islands we take ourselves to be. We are more like an eddy in a flowing river, a pattern that keeps its shape for a while, always made of water that is passing through. The eddy is real. You can point to it, but it is not a thing standing apart from the river. It is the river, moving. This can feel unsettling at first, even a little frightening, much as it frightened the stream. If I am not a fixed thing, then who am I? But stay with it gently, and the fear can soften into a deep relief. You are not a statue that must be kept forever as it is. You are something alive and moving and free to change. You do not have to carry the heavy task of always being the same person. of defending one fixed image of yourself against each new day. You are allowed to grow. You are allowed to become new. But there is a further turn to this, and it may be the most beautiful part of all. A young woman, troubled by exactly this question, once went to see an old flute maker who was known for his wisdom as much as for his craft. She had spent months trying to discover her true self. She had sat alone, looking inward, turning the question over and over. Who am I really? And the more she searched within, the more lost she felt, for she could find nothing solid to take hold of. She came to the flute maker worn out and discouraged. He listened to her trouble, then picked up one of his flutes, a plain length of hollow bamboo, and held it out to her. "Tell me," he said, "where is the music of this flute?" She looked at it. "I cannot say," she answered. "It is silent. It is only a piece of bamboo." "Just so," he said. "Sitting here on the table, it is silent. Its music is nowhere inside it. If you split it open to search for the song, you would find only empty wood." And yet, he lifted it to his lips and played a few clear, lovely notes. "The music is real." Where was it hiding? "It was not hiding anywhere," she said slowly. "It only came when your breath moved through it." "Just so," said the flute maker. "The music is not a thing the flute keeps locked inside itself. It happens in the meeting between the breath and the bamboo. And you, my dear, have been asking what your music is while you sit alone and silent on the shelf. You will never find it that way, for it is not in there to be found. You are not a thing on a shelf. You are what happens when you meet the world. Your kindness appears when there is someone before you to be kind to. Your courage appears when something is asked of you. You come alive in the meeting. So stop searching inside the silent bamboo. Go and let yourself be played." The young woman left the flute maker's workshop lighter than she had come to it. She had arrived believing that until she had solved the riddle of herself, she could not truly begin to live. She left understanding that she had it backwards. It was in the living that she would meet herself, again and again, never quite finished, always sounding. The great Zen master Dogen pointed to this same truth in words that have echoed for many centuries. To study the way, he said, is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self, and to forget the self is to be confirmed by all things. It is worth sitting with that, gently. We begin by turning inward, trying to understand who we are. But the search eventually empties out. We look and find no fixed self anywhere. And at some point, we stop straining inward and simply allow ourselves to be. We forget the self, in the sense of releasing our tight grip on it. And in that letting go, something opens. We find ourselves reflected back by everything we meet. The morning reveals us. The people in our lives reveal us. The work of our hands reveals us. We are confirmed, made real, not by something buried deep inside, but by how we meet the whole of the life around us. Think of how you actually come to know who you are. Rarely by sitting alone and inspecting yourself. Far more often by living. You discover you are patient when a restless child is placed in your care. You discover what you love when you lose all track of the hours doing it. You learn your own strength only when something heavy is set before you to carry. The self is not a fact you can read off a page. It shows itself in the meeting and keeps revealing new sides you never knew were there. There is great freedom in this. So much of our struggle comes from defending a small, fixed self, anxiously guarding our image and our pride and our sense of who we are supposed to be. When we loosen that grip, even a little, we are no longer so easily wounded because we have so much less to protect. And strangely, we become more fully ourselves, not less, for we are no longer trying to squeeze the whole of our vast life into one narrow, unchanging shape. Like the stream that rose and fell and became itself again on the far side of the desert, we are freer and larger than the single form we cling to. You do not need to settle the great question of the self to taste a little of this freedom. It is enough, here and there, to hold yourself more lightly, to notice when you are anxiously defending a fixed idea of who you are, and to soften just a little, to allow that you might be more than the story you have always told about yourself, more than your habits, more than your past, more than the labels that you and others have placed upon you over the years. And it can be a real comfort on a hard day to remember that you are not a finished and final thing. The person you are right now is not the whole of you, and certainly not the end of you. There is room to grow, room to change, room to be surprised by yourself. You are not a stone. You are living water, still moving, still becoming, free to flow into shapes you have not yet imagined. This is a freeing thing to carry into your days. When you catch yourself insisting, "I am simply this kind of person, I could never change," you might hold that thought a little more loosely. It may have been true once. It may not be true now. You have already been many people in this one life, and there are more of them still ahead, waiting in the parts of you that have not yet been called upon. So when the question comes, "Who are you?" perhaps the kindest answer is also the truest. Not a fixed thing to be pinned down and defended, but a living, changing, open process, revealed a little more with each thing you meet, and never quite finished. There is room to breathe in that. There is room, at last, to be at ease. There is nowhere you need to be just now. No one to be, nothing to become, only this. Rest, and let that be enough. When you are ready, we will go on from here. There was once a teacher who had practiced and taught through a very long life and was loved by many. As he grew old, his students gathered around him more and more, sensing that their time with him was becoming precious. They had a question they had long wished to ask, and at last, one evening, they found the courage to put it to him. "Teacher," said one, "you have walked this path for 70 years. You have seen more and understood more than the rest of us ever will. Before it grows too late, will you tell us, after a whole lifetime of practice, what is the one thing you know for certain? What is the final truth you have arrived at?" The old teacher was silent for a while. They leaned in close, expecting at last the great summary of his life, the distilled wisdom of 70 years. He smiled, and what he said surprised them. "The longer I have practiced," he told them, "the less certain I have become. When I was young, I was sure of a great many things. I had an answer ready for everything. Now I am old, and I find I am sure of almost nothing at all. The more I have seen, the more mysterious it all becomes to me." The students were puzzled. This was not the triumphant conclusion they had been hoping for. "But surely," one of them said, "after so long, You must have grown more certain, not less. Is it not troubling to know less now than you thought you knew as a young man? Not in the least, said the old teacher, and his eyes were bright. It is the greatest relief of my life. When I was young and certain, I was also tense and quick to judge, and often unkind, because I was forever defending all the things I was so sure of. Now that I have laid most of that down, I am lighter. I can meet each person and each new day without a wall of opinions standing in front of me. I no longer have to be right. I only have to be here and to look and to love what is in front of me. My uncertainty is not a hole where my wisdom should be. It is the room my wisdom finally made. There is a strange and lovely pattern here, one that anyone who has walked a path of growth for a while begins to notice. The deeper the understanding, the more humble the person tends to become. It is the half-learned who are loud and certain. The truly wise are usually soft-spoken, slow to claim, quick to say, "I may be wrong about that." We sometimes imagine that the goal of all this inner work is to arrive, finally, at a place of complete certainty where we have everything figured out and can rest in being right. But it tends to run the other way. The more honestly we look at life, the more vast and mysterious it shows itself to be, and the smaller and more humble our certainties become. This is not a failure. It is a sign of ripening. You can feel the freedom of this in ordinary life, in something as small as a disagreement. Notice the tight, defended feeling of being absolutely certain you are right, how it narrows you and sets you against the other person. Then notice how it feels to loosen, even a little, to allow the simple thought, perhaps I do not have the whole picture. Something in the chest unclenches. The other person stops being an opponent to be beaten and becomes a person to be understood. We lose nothing real by admitting we might be wrong. We only lose the strain of pretending that we cannot be. There is a similar ease in being able to say, simply, "I do not know." A child asks a hard question, and instead of inventing an answer in order to seem wise, you say, "What a good question. I do not know. Let us wonder about it together." Something relaxes. You are no longer performing a knowledge you do not have. Most of us were taught, somewhere along the way, that not knowing is a kind of failure, a thing to be hidden. But there is no shame in the honest edges of our understanding. Every wise person who ever lived stood at those edges, and most of them learned, in time, to stand there gladly. There is a real danger on any path of growth, and it is worth naming plainly. Sometimes a person tastes a little insight, a moment of genuine peace or clarity, and instead of being humbled by it, they are puffed up. They begin to feel they have arrived, that they now know something others do not. And in that very moment, they stop growing. The freshness goes out of them. They trade the open road of a beginner for the locked gate of an expert. The Buddha warned, again and again, against clinging to our views and opinions, holding them up like banners and defending them against all comers. For the moment we are certain we have grasped the truth, we have usually stopped truly looking at it. True humility, then, is not thinking poorly of yourself. It is something lighter than that. It is simply not being so terribly concerned with yourself at all, with your rightness, your image, your standing among others. The humble person is not forever measuring whether they come out better or worse than the people around them. They have largely set the question down, and freed from that exhausting comparison, they can give their whole attention to the person in front of them and to the moment they are actually in. Humility, in the end, is a kind of freedom from the tyranny of the self. An old image from the rice fields holds all of this beautifully. A proud young man, clever and well-read, once walked with an old farmer along the edge of his fields at harvest time. The young man was full of his own learning and eager to display it, and he spoke at length about everything he knew, hardly pausing to draw breath. The old farmer listened without a word. After a while, he stopped walking and gestured out across the ripening rice. "Tell me," he said. "Look closely at the stalks. Some of them stand up tall and straight, with their heads held high. Others are bowed low, their heads bent toward the earth. Which of them, do you suppose, are the full ones, heavy with ripe grain?" "The tall ones, surely," the young man answered at once. "They stand the strongest and the proudest of all." The old farmer only smiled and said, "Look closer." The young man looked again, and more carefully this time. The stalks that stood up proud and straight were the empty ones, their husks light and hollow. The stalks that bowed the lowest were the ones grown heavy and full with ripe grain, bending under the weight of all that they carried. The old farmer smiled. "It is the same with people," he said. "The empty ones stand tall and proud, holding their heads high, anxious to be seen. The truly full ones bow their heads. The more they carry, the lower they bend. When you meet a person who has grown genuinely wise, you will not find them standing over you. You will find them humble, close to the ground, like the ripest grain in the field." The young man walked the rest of the way in silence, and he carried his head a little differently from that day on. To grow humble in this way is not to become weak or wishy-washy or to believe in nothing at all. It is something firmer and kinder than that. It is to hold what we know with open hands, ready to learn, ready to be corrected, ready to be surprised. There is a great peace in this. So much of our tension comes from the labor of defending our certainties, of needing to be right, of propping up the image of someone who has it all worked out. When we set that burden down, we can breathe again. Think of how tiring it is to be the one who must always know, to have an answer ready for everything, to never be caught unsure, to defend each opinion as though it were a limb of your own body. It is a heavy way to live. The humble heart is spared all of that. It can say, "I do not know," and feel no shame in it. It can change its mind without feeling it has lost. It can learn from a child, or a stranger, or even someone it dislikes, because it is not too proud to receive. There is a lightness in such a heart that the certain and the self-assured never come to know. And there is a sweetness in being near such a person. The humble are easy to be with. They do not make us feel small in order to feel large themselves. They listen, truly listen, because they are not merely waiting for their turn to say what they already know. They leave room for us. We can disagree with them without it turning into a battle. Around the arrogant, we grow guarded and tense. Around the genuinely humble, we relax and open and become a little more ourselves. Of all the fruits of a long inner journey, this open, unguarded humility may be the one that blesses other people most. You can see it most clearly in how such people receive being corrected. The proud bristle and defend when shown they are wrong, because their whole sense of themselves is bound up in being right. But a humble person, shown a better way of seeing something, will often light up with genuine pleasure. To them, Being corrected is not a defeat. It is a gift. They have learned something new, and the learning delights them, even late in life, even from someone half their age. There is a story of a renowned teacher who, when a young student pointed out a flaw in his reasoning before the whole assembly, did not grow stern or embarrassed. He bowed to the young one and said, with a wide smile, "Thank you. You have shown me something I could not see for myself. Today I am your student." The hall was astonished, but that bow was the truest teaching he offered all year. And here, near the end, the path circles back to where it began. For this humble not knowing, this willingness to be unsure, is the very heart of a beginner's mind. The old teacher, after 70 years, had come all the way around to where his youngest student was standing, at the edge of a great mystery, knowing almost nothing, filled with wonder at it. The difference is only that the beginner has not yet learned how much there is that we cannot know, while the sage has learned it deeply and made peace with it and found it beautiful. To live with open hands and an open mind, unsure and unafraid, endlessly curious, is not some stop along the way to wisdom. It may be the whole of it, and its great reward. None of this asks you to throw away what you know, or to pretend to a humility you do not feel. It is more an invitation to hold your certainties a little more loosely, here and there through your days. When you notice the urge to be right, to win the point, to prove that you know, you might pause and let it soften. You might try the small, freeing words, "I might be wrong," and notice that the sky does not fall. You might let someone else be right, even when you are fairly sure that you are not, simply for the ease of it. And when life sets before you, as it surely will, something you cannot understand or explain, you might meet it not with frustration, but with something closer to wonder. Not every question needs an answer. Some of them are meant only to be lived with, held open, marveled at. There is a deep rest in no longer needing to have it all figured out. The mystery was never a problem to be solved. It was a vast and beautiful country to be lived in, with humility and with open eyes. And perhaps the loveliest part is the wonder that comes flooding back the moment we stop pretending to know everything. A person sure of all the answers lives in a small, closed, finished world. A person willing not to know lives in an open one, full of mystery and surprise, where the most ordinary things, a star, a stranger, a single breath, can still stop a person in their tracks with amazement. To not know, it turns out, is not a poverty at all. It is the very door through which wonder returns. Let us pause a moment. There is nothing here you must figure out, and nothing you need to be certain of. Let the questions stay open and rest. There is no need to hurry. We will continue whenever you wish. Long ago, a potter made bowls and jars that were known throughout the land. One year, the taste of the court turned toward his style, and all at once, everyone wanted his work. Nobles praised him without restraint. Crowds gathered at his door. He was called a genius, the finest potter in living memory, and every piece was snatched up the moment it left the kiln. A few years later, the fashion changed. A new style came into favor, and the same court that had adored him now found his work plain and old. The crowds melted away. The very people who had called him a genius passed his shop without a glance, and some even mocked the work they had once clamored to own. Through all of it, the potter remained the same. He rose each morning, sat at his wheel, and shaped his bowls and jars with the same care, in the years of praise and in the years of scorn alike. He seemed neither lifted up by the one nor cast down by the other. A young apprentice, who had come to him during the lean years, could not understand it. "Master," he said, "how do you bear it? They worshipped you once, and now they laugh. Does it not wound you? And before, did their praise not delight you beyond measure?" The potter set down the bowl he was shaping. "When they praised me," he said, "I knew in my own heart that I was not as great as they claimed. So I did not let their praise swell my head. And now that they mock me, I know I am not as poor as they say. So I do not let their scorn break my heart. Their praise and their scorn belong to them and to their ever-changing fashions. My work belongs to the clay and to the care I bring to it each day. Had I believed them when they called me a genius, I would be bound to believe them now that they call me a fool. So I believe them neither time. I simply make my bowls." The apprentice never forgot it. Years afterward, when his own work was admired, and then in time forgotten, and later admired once more, he found he could meet all of it with a steadier heart, for he had once watched an old man at a potter's wheel who belonged neither to the praise nor to the blame, but only to the clay. There is an old teaching in Buddhism about what are called the 8 worldly winds. They blow through every human life, and they come in 4 pairs: pleasure and pain, gain and loss, praise and blame, a good name and a bad one. These winds are always blowing. One day they lift us up, the next they knock us flat. And most of us are tossed about by them helplessly, soaring when the wind is fair and despairing when it turns against us, our whole inner weather left at the mercy of whatever happens to be blowing through. We all know how this feels. A single careless remark from someone can sour an entire day, replaying in the mind for hours. A word of praise can lift us up far higher than it deserves, and then we find ourselves aching for more of it. A small gain delights us out of all proportion. A small loss gnaws at us for far too long. We hand the keys to our peace of mind to whatever happens to be passing by, and so our contentment grows as changeable as the weather, never quite ours to keep. The Buddha taught that a settled heart is one that has learned not to be ruled by these winds, not to feel nothing, not to grow cold, but to stop being swept off its feet by every passing gust. The potter understood this. He felt the praise and the blame, surely, but he did not build his house upon them. He had something steadier to stand on, the simple integrity of his work, and a clear sense of who he was that did not rise or fall with the crowd's opinion. This is what is sometimes called equanimity. It is not coldness, and it is not indifference. A person with a steady heart still loves, still cares, still feels joy and sorrow keenly. But beneath the changing weather of feeling, there is a kind of ground in them that does not wash away. They are not destroyed by loss, nor made arrogant by gain. They can meet good fortune and hard fortune alike with the same open and steady heart. It helps to see that praise and blame, especially, tell us more about the people giving them than about ourselves. A crowd praises whatever is in fashion and scorns whatever has fallen out of it, and fashions turn like the wind. If we let their applause define us, we have also quietly agreed to let their scorn define us, and we have handed our sense of worth to people who may know us very little. The potter understood this. He kept his measure of himself in his own hands, and so neither the cheering nor the jeering could carry it away. There is an image that has helped people steady themselves for a very long time. It is the image of a mountain. A restless young woman, thrown easily from joy to despair by the smallest turns of fortune, once sought out a forest sage known for her great calm. "Teach me to be steady," the young woman asked. "My happiness rises and falls with every passing thing. A kind word lifts me to the clouds, a cold one casts me down for days. I am worn out by it. How do I find solid ground beneath my feet?" The sage did not answer with words. She led the young woman to a place where they could sit and look upon a great mountain, and there they stayed, through a long and changing day. In the morning, the sun rose warm and golden upon the mountain's slopes, and birds sang in the trees along its sides. By midday, dark clouds had rolled in, and a storm broke over the peak, lashing it with wind and rain. In the afternoon, the storm moved on, and pale mist drifted slowly along the ridges. As evening came, the light turned soft and rose-colored, and then the first stars appeared above the summit. "Watch the mountain," the sage said at last. "All day long the weather has changed upon it. Sunshine, storm, mist, starlight, each one came and went. The mountain welcomed all of it and held on to none of it. When the storm came, the mountain did not cry out that its sunshine had been stolen. When the sun returned, it did not clutch at it in fear of the next cloud. Through every change of weather, the mountain remained itself, steady and at peace. The storm was real. The mountain felt it. But the mountain was not the storm. It was the mountain." The young woman sat with this a long while, watching the last light fade from the peak. "So I am not meant to stop the weather," she said. "You could not, if you tried," said the sage. "The weather of a life will always come and go. Praise and blame, gain and loss, joy and sorrow, these are the seasons of every life, and no one born escapes them. But you need not be only the weather, blown here and there by each passing gust. You can also be the mountain. The weather will move across you, and you will feel it fully. And still, underneath it all, you can remain." The young woman went home changed. The turns of fortune did not stop for her, as they stopped for no one. But she no longer mistook the weather for herself. When bright days came, she enjoyed them without clutching. When dark ones came, she bowed her head and waited, trusting the sky to clear in its own time, as skies do. She had found, at last, the solid ground she had been missing, and discovered that it had been inside her all along. To be the mountain does not mean to feel nothing. The mountain is not made of stone because it has hardened itself against the rain. The steadiness the sage spoke of is not a wall we build to keep life out. It grows, instead, out of everything this whole long journey has been pointing toward. When we have truly seen that all things change, the swings of fortune lose some of their power to shock us. When we hold things a little more loosely, their coming and going does not tear at us so badly. When we no longer need the crowd's praise in order to know our own worth, their blame can no longer destroy us. Equanimity is not one more thing to force into being. It ripens on its own, the natural fruit of a softening heart. And here is the gift hidden in it. A steady heart is not a smaller life, drained of feeling. It is a far larger one. The person tossed about by every wind lives in a small and frightened world, forever bracing against the next blow. The person with some steadiness beneath them can open to life more fully, precisely because they are no longer so afraid of it. They can love without the terror of loss ruling them. They can take a risk and meet failure and rise to try again. They can feel sorrow deeply and not be drowned by it, because they know, underneath, that they will remain. There is a freedom in this that reaches into everything. When you are less afraid of the wind, you stop arranging your whole life around avoiding it. You stop saying no to what you love out of fear that you might one day lose it. You stop shrinking your world down to only the safe and the certain. The steady heart can say yes to life, all of it, the bright and the dark together, because it has stopped demanding that life be only bright. And life, met that way, with open arms instead of braced shoulders, turns out to be far richer than the careful, guarded version we settle for when fear holds the reins. And notice that this steadiness serves us, in the good times, every bit as much as the hard ones. We tend to think of equanimity as something for weathering loss, but it also lets us truly enjoy our blessings, for we are no longer spoiling them with the fear of their ending, nor clutching at them so tightly that we crush the pleasure out of them. The even heart can hold a happy hour with open hands, fully present to it, grateful for it, and free. It is not only a shelter in the storm, it is also what allows us to stand in the sunshine without anxiously scanning the horizon for the next cloud. This is perhaps the gentlest strength there is. It does not announce itself. The person who carries it is often the calm one in the room when everything is going wrong, the one others somehow lean toward in hard times. They are not unmoved. They have simply found, somewhere beneath the surface of their feelings, a place the storms do not reach, and they have learned the way back to it. And the truly remarkable thing is that this place is in everyone. It is not a rare gift handed to a lucky few. It is the deep nature of the heart itself, always there beneath the noise, waiting only to be remembered. You do not need to become a mountain overnight, or to never again be moved by the turns of your days. This steadiness arrives slowly, and it arrives on its own, a little more, each time we meet a disappointment without falling apart, or receive some praise without losing our heads over it. It helps simply to remember, in the middle of the weather, that the weather is only weather. When something lifts you high, you might enjoy it and hold it lightly, knowing it will pass. When something casts you down, you might let yourself feel it fully and remember that this too is a passing season and that beneath it, the deeper part of you remains. There is great rest in this remembering. The next time a sharp word stings, or a piece of good news sweeps you up, or a careful plan falls to pieces, you might feel for the mountain beneath the storm, the steady ground in you that all the weather of a life moves across but can never wash away. It is always there. It was there before this storm, and it will be there long after. You have only to remember to stand upon it, and you will forget, of course. Everyone does. The storm will come, and you will be swept up in it, and only later will you remember the mountain. That is no failure. The remembering is itself the practice, and each time it tends to come a little sooner than before. Slowly, across a life, the storms grow no less frequent, but they grow less able to convince you that they are all there is. You learn, again and again, to find your way back to the steady ground beneath them. And that homecoming, repeated patiently over the years, becomes its own kind of peace. Let us be at ease here for a while. Let whatever you are feeling be just as it is, like weather drifting across a mountain. No need to chase it. No need to push it away. When you feel ready, we will continue. We have come, together, to the end of our time tonight. Before we part, let us gather up the single thread that has run through all of it, and then set even that gently down. Everything we have touched on comes back to one simple thing: to meet your life as it actually is, fresh, this very moment, before the mind decides it already knows. The whole of it grows from there. When we meet each moment new, we stop expecting the world to hold still, and we can let things change without breaking. We hold what we love with open hands and find we love it more freely for the loosened grip. We stop chasing some final answer far down the road and discover that the peace we were looking for was never far away at all. It was here the whole time, waiting in the plain materials of an ordinary day. And this open way of meeting life does not stay locked inside us. It softens into how we treat the people around us. It becomes a kinder word, a moment of real attention, a patience we did not have before. The seeing turns into kindness almost on its own, and we begin to find, as countless wise hearts have found before us, that caring for others is one of the surest roads back to our own peace. Somewhere along the way, the heavy need to be certain begins to lift. We grow a little more humble, a little more willing to say, "I do not know," and we are lighter for it. We are less swept about by the praise and the blame, the small gains and the small losses, the passing weather of our days. And beneath all of that, we begin to feel a steadier ground, one that was within us the whole time, waiting only to be remembered. You do not need to hold on to any of these words. Let them settle wherever they will, and let the rest fall away. The teachings were never really the point. The point is the life that is yours, right now, this breath, this evening, asking only to be met. It will still be here tomorrow, fresh and new. The bell of each morning never once struck before. There is nothing you must achieve, and nowhere else you need to be. So let your body grow heavy now, and your thoughts grow slow. Let the day you have lived drift away behind you, like a shore falling quietly away behind a boat. There is nothing left to do tonight. There is nothing left to solve. You have done enough. You are enough, exactly as you are, with nothing added and nothing taken away. Rest now with an open mind, a soft heart, and nothing at all to hold. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Midnight Monk.